So, Digby, as we speak, the Republicans are planning. I mean, frankly, from my perspective, what we're about to see is a show. I mean, we're watching a basically a piece of performance art where the so-called moderates in the Republican caucus in the Senate are creating structures so that they can cave them. I mean, literally, this is like we are building a Potemkin village so that we can show that we're burning down the village. And they are doing it. And I should say, we spoke to Andy Slavitt about the sort of the details about this, but I think it deserves more discussion because, we read this week that in the New York Times that there was a GOP rift over Medicaid and opioid treatments. And you had Rob Portman coming out there saying, like, I can't vote for this bill unless there's opioid treatments. We know this is following almost the exact same script, right, as it was in the House, where, like, we can't have this, and suddenly somebody comes up with an amendment where we're going to add another $8 billion to this or something like that is supposedly going to mean something. This is all kabuki theater. There's not a single Republican moderate mentioned in any story that anybody's reading who doesn't already know they're going to vote for this. They all are going to vote for this. And this is a theater that we're being just sort of, it seems to me, we're just being led down the aisle about.
Oh, I am so with you. I mean, I am sort of mordantly chuckling, not because I'm happy about it. This is an absolute nightmare what they're plotting here, and it's not just the the kabuki is part of it. Of course, this is what they're doing. They are running the same playbook they ran in the House. They learned their lesson, and learn that they have to pretend to care about people, and they have to go, okay, fine. We've done some things like they did allegedly with the high risk pools in the House, right? This time they're going to do some Band-Aid on opioids and maybe Medicaid, none of which will be real. It'll be absolute nonsense. And when they're going to, vote on it, they're going to get the CBO score, and then they're going to invalidate that by saying that CBO scores are always wrong. And then they're all going to vote for it, the moderates. Now, there is some slim possibility that what will happen is that this amendment, whatever it is, now I think Mitch McConnell is a fairly clever fellow who sees this coming, and he will do something to kind of try and head this off. But that the more the super conservatives or libertarian types, Rand Paul, Mike Lee, maybe Ted Cruz, that those guys on the far right would be the ones to stand in their way. They're not afraid of basically obstructing everything. They've done it before. They'll do it again. They don't care what these people think. Now, I don't know if they'll do it on health care. It's possible that, this is something they feel their people really want, so they'll go for it. But that is those people are the ones I'm watching. The moderates, of course, are going to cave. There's just no doubt about it. That's what they're going to do. This is a whole, little political theater that they're putting on so they can pretend. And then Donald Trump can swoop in. Just wait until he does this. They sent in Trump or Pence or something, and he talked to them all and made it less mean. Didn't he call it a mean, cold-hearted son of a bitch the other day? Well, he made sure they fixed all that mean, cold-hearted son of a bitch stuff, and now it's good for people. It'll be cheap and accessible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, this is all some kind of political theater. Now, what's happening on the process underneath all this is astonishing. I mean, we've never seen anything like this. In fact, somebody, an analyst that, studies these things, wrote the other day that not since World War I has anybody tried to do a major piece of legislation like this under such secret conditions. And it's even worse than we thought. I mean, I just read, I don't know, sometime in the middle of last week, that it turns out that the working group that supposedly was putting together this plan behind closed doors, the sort of Bohemian Grove boys club that's doing this, and nobody knows what, even they didn't know what it was doing. This was being put together by staffers in the leadership without really even the senators having any input into it, at least on any kind of detailed basis. So, I mean, this is an astonishing process. And then they're going to potentially ignore the parliamentarian, ignore the CBO, break the Byrd rule, which is the rule that requires them to not increase the deficit. They are using any means necessary to try and get this thing through. And it's it's an amazing thing, and I don't know. I honestly don't know what Democrats can do to stop it. But my God, the protests have got to reach a fever pitch at this point.
And let's give credit where credit's due. I mean, Democrats responded to pressure from, frankly, their base, and have pursued a strategy to gum up the works, with the hopes of pushing this vote past July 4th, the July 4th recess. Basically just saying, like, all we can do is give time for groups like Indivisible and Move On to build enough energy to protest these things. But I'm not even convinced, frankly, that there is going to be enough, never mind time, like enough oxygen. I mean, the Republicans have been very smart about this. I mean, I have to say, this strategy of like doing it completely in secret, the idea that you and I are spending 3 or 4 minutes talking about how offensive this process is, that's all well and good, but nobody cares.
Nobody cares. It's process. No one cares.
It's process, and nobody cares. And nobody cares as much as us being able to say, like, oh my gosh, this destroys health insurance for 22, 24, 21, 20, 19, 27 million Americans, that it's going to implicate the health insurance, the quality of health insurance for tens of millions of more because of the waiver procedures and the fact that, you can, corporations and employee-based insurance can buy insurance under the standards of the lowest common denominator state in terms of what constitutes insurance. So, the strategy has been successful. And, I want to come back. I want to talk a little bit about, what's going on in terms of the investigation of Donald Trump, because I think we've reached a period where it doesn't matter how much under assault Donald Trump is by these investigations. And I think he is, and I think with good reason. In fact, there was also a piece this week that I think got to the more financial improprieties questions, which we can discuss in a moment. But it does appear that the Republicans are so hell-bent on getting this tax cut, because that's what I think this is. This is not a health care reform bill.
Absolutely.
This is a tax cut bill, and if you understand it in that way, I think it makes total sense. And I think, and we could talk about this when we get to the other side, you hear people saying, like, don't they think they're going to pay a price for this, and et cetera, et cetera? I don't think they care. I honestly think that this, for them, represents the first permanent tax reform bill they can all vote for and usher in since 1986 when Ronald Reagan did it. And I think there is no other reason in these people's minds to be a Republican if it's not to do this. We got to take a quick break. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio. Be right back with Digby.